Welcome back to another Looking for Work. Do this every week, Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Super excited to answer questions, help people get unstuck, get unblocked in the process of landing that first gig. I know it can be terribly difficult, but the good news is it is a really, really tight labor market. And what that means for you, if you're a potential job seeker, is a lot more opportunity now than ever before in like human existence. And a lot of that is because the pressure that was once a barrier. So when I entered the space 5-6 years ago, a lot of folks were going to or thinking about going to immersive coding boot camps. I don't know what that's a lot to say, but immersive coding boot camps. And they were finding that because there wasn't a lot of awareness, companies were kind of willing to try it out and see what the quality of the candidates were going to be out of this pipeline. But then there was a little bit of a pendulum swinging the other way, and a lot of organizations are just like, nope, not hiring students. We've tried it. It didn't work. We're not ready to support them. And so I think the pendulum is kind of swinging back towards the middle. A lot of big employers, big tech companies are saying, hey, the degree is not the most important criteria for us to most important signal for us to look at for a quality employee. And so, we're open to trying some different things again and better positioning themselves. So that said, I think now the pressure is back on organizations to attract and retain diverse talent, and they're looking in many different ways and willing to recalibrate their wish list, because a lot of organizations want people that are super seasoned, have lots of experience. Everyone's always hiring senior engineers. So anytime someone says, hey, we're looking to hire, and okay, what level? They always say seniors, right? But they're now more and more willing to hire mid-level engineers, or if they have some mid-level engineers, they might be looking to hire some entry-level junior engineers. So it's a great time to level your skill up, position yourself so that you should be able to find some of these opportunities. So I'm going to pause and just sort of reset that. The way this works is if you drop a comment in LinkedIn, or if you drop a comment, we're currently on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook, I will see that comment and I'll be able to answer that question. I love helping people that are on this pathway towards their first role. And I know just how challenging it can be to get that first opportunity, but I guarantee you, after you get the first job, if you're a decent human being and a good employee, and you work hard, a lifelong learner, you're going to be fine. You're going to have plenty of work for the rest of your career, and you'll have a lot of flexibility and opportunities if you just make that initial extra effort to do the job search. So I'm going to pause there and wait for folks to drop some comments, and then I'll check. I did have a few that came through via email, and see if we can rip through some of those. So questions, what are your questions about the job search process? So while I start ripping through the ones that came via email, if you have any questions, again, feel free to drop them in the comment box. They'll come directly to me, and take my best shot at answering. Okay, so for the first question, I get this via email a lot, and thanks, Philip. Just saw you jump in there with a question on LinkedIn. Let me cover this one, and then I'll answer yours. So I hear a lot of, I haven't heard back. What am I doing wrong? So I will take accountability. If you applied for our apprenticeship program and you haven't heard back, it's simply because we have a huge volume of people that would love to get paid to learn how to code. So for us, it's just we're a really small organization, and it takes us a while to go through the vetting process to identify which candidates we want to bring in for an interview. And my guess is for a lot of organizations that are kind of behind on talent and they're trying to, not only put out fires and produce quality software, but also grow their teams, they're in a similar position where it just takes a little while to get all the decision makers to say, yes, this is the person we're going to invest in, calling back or interviewing and moving through the process. But the good news is by the time they make that decision, they're usually really interested and they usually really want you to be part of the team. And now it's almost like your job to lose at that point in many cases in terms of the pendulum shifting. So hopefully, first thing is don't get too stressed out if it takes a while for them to respond to you, or if you get ghosted and they don't respond at all. It just could be that, like, unfortunately, they don't have good news, and sometimes people try and avoid delivering bad news. So it could be that they just don't want to deliver bad news, so they're a little skittish on giving you that harsh reality, which is they're not going to bring you in. But follow up. That'll be the first thing if you haven't heard back. And then the second part to that is, what am I doing wrong? That requires looking at the spreadsheet that you're using to track your reach outs and your follow-ups. Only by looking at a holistic picture of all the steps that you're doing would I be able to give you that more detailed analysis of okay, here's what I would diagnose as the reason why you have this challenge. And it's because you're not reaching out to enough folks, you're not reaching out to the right folks, you're not following up with them, whatever those pieces are. But the only way to do that is to keep track of it and to see how many people are you reaching out, when are you reaching out to them, when are you following up with them. And when you look at those numbers, you can start to see where they don't fit the normal trends that I see with most other people that are job searching. If you do 10 a week, 10 good solid application, reach out, connect with a internal champion, it should not take you that long, and you should get some phone screenings, and then for every 2 or 3 phone screenings you get an interview, and it should only take you 1 or 2 interviews to get a job. If any of those numbers are off, then I can look at the volume of each of those and figure out, well, okay, you're doing a lot of phone screens, but you're not converting, so you're saying something during the call, or you're missing the ball, somewhere, and kind of diagnose what you need to change. So hopefully that answers that question about having not heard back and what am I doing wrong. Philip asks, what is my experience or advice for growing talent from entry level through to mid level? And how about recruiting for personality or ability? So the first question is, growing talent is really hard. And so there's a couple pieces of advice I would share that could make it easier. One is really kind of try and roadmap out what are the career paths within your organization. And many organizations don't have a really good, you start at software 1, then you become software engineer 2, or you start at this role and then you transition to that role. So really work through with your engineering leadership team, what is the desired career progression? Then once you've figured that out, then you can start building the blocks of, okay, how do we make sure that someone's on that pathway, and what are the skills gaps between entry level and mid? It's really hard without knowing these are the skill sets that you're looking for to determine someone is mid-level first, and then working towards, well, how do I assess what their gaps are? Then that breaks down into what's the feedback mechanisms you're using. So many companies I worked at, we had regular recurring feedback sessions or one-on-ones with employees. We do, stop, start, continue. What are some things you should stop? What are some things you should start? What are some things that you should continue doing as an individual to progress on this roadmap that we have for you? I think once you have those in place, then I think you should be in good shape to be able to put the resources in place to say, okay, now we're going to provide the training to help fill that gap between where you are and where we need you to be for mid, or where we need you to be for senior, or where we need you to be for principal, right? So that's been what I think has been most helpful in organizations that really do a good job of grooming talent. They have all that in place. The organizations that don't do a good job, my experience has been, it's because all those pieces are non-existent, or they got one piece, but they're missing the other piece. They don't look at it as holistic. They just look at how do I fix this problem with this employee who does not seem to be progressing? So hopefully that's helpful, Philip, to sort of a stab at that first part. And then in terms of recruiting, personality or ability, I'm not a huge fan of the personality, of the cultural fit, right? Because I believe that If you have a good sense of strong cultural values within your organization that are reasonable. So ours at our program are, we want people to be rad, resourceful, accountable, diligent. Those are business focused. Those are focused on what we feel makes people successful within our program and with employers. And so I think those are relevant values culturally for us to be impressing upon our employees. So I think personality wise, I would like to see that they can embrace those values. But if they have, for example, a quirky personality, or they're neurodiverse instead of neurotypical, right? Then I think the question is, can they do the job and can they embody those values? And if so, that's more important and I think a stronger signal than personality. Now, ability-wise, because I work with a lot of early career developers, I want to see what's their capacity and where do I think their capacity is over the first, let's say, 3 months, if that's how we evaluate success. Can I get them to where they need to be in the 3 months of training that we're going to provide as we ramp this person on or onboard this person? So those are the attributes that I look for when we're trying to recruit and select candidates. We look for candidates that have some of those like soft skills, emotional intelligence, good communicators. They're gritty, they're problem solvers, but they're also coachable and they have learning agility and they have the right motivation to be going through a program like ours. And that's kind of what we're recruiting for. Then we love when there's some barriers that we can eliminate. Like maybe this individual could not go through a traditional 4-year CS degree program because they couldn't finance it or because they couldn't set the parts of their life that are chaotic aside and focus for 4 years to be able to get through, a university program. So we love being able to say, okay, well, you're a perfect fit because we can mitigate and provide some wraparound services to help with some of those barriers. So for every organization, when you start thinking about the ability, I try and think for investing in people or investing in human capital, what's the person's capacity, not their ability right now? What do we think their capacity is in the short term? Can we get them to where we need them to be? And if that's the case, we should be hiring that person. And I think that opens up a wider net and allows you to hire a much more diverse set of people with different skills and maybe transferable skills or industry experience, but not maybe the technical experience. And then you can train them in technical pieces, but it's hard to teach the soft skills. If they understand fundamentally your business, or you can get them to understand your business, then you can get them to the other pieces in many cases. So hopefully that helps, Philip. And hopefully that also helps for job seekers as you start thinking about how can you craft a narrative about how you check all those boxes for an employer like me? Because if you can demonstrate that you've got that grit and you can demonstrate that you've got the capacity to gain the skills over a short period of time, then I'll make the decision to hire you. But if it's like, I can tell it's taking you a while, you haven't demonstrated the capacity to be able to learn material over a shorter period of time, it would just be hard for us to have confidence we can make you successful. So thanks, Philip. I see your response. Value-based is probably better than personality. Fully agree. You have a culture, you can accommodate diverse personalities. Yeah, absolutely. So love the support, man. Love the support. So Michelle asks, we have several diverse talent in STEM that we'd like to skill to the market, diverse talent. That's more of a statement. I like that. So if there is a question there that might have gotten cut off, please drop it in there because I'd love to hear the rest of it. Seems like that's a partial thought about diverse talent. I mean, in my perspective, I am a huge believer that talent is distributed evenly, but the opportunities are not all across the board. There are some folks that have way more just things that are going to make it harder for them to be successful. Just call them things, right? Could be life circumstances, could be the resources around them. But at the end of the day, they are not going to be able to fully leverage that talent unless someone can see, hey, this person is going to be a rock star. They just need this moved out of the way, or they need an opportunity and a foot in the door, or they need a bridge to be able to get into where the industry is. They need mentorship for a little bit of polishing, whatever those things are. But if you truly believe that talent is distributed evenly, and you walk into a shop and you see there's not a diverse talent pool there represented in the workforce, they are missing geniuses. They're missing the person that's going to like crush it on their team, and they're going to just like have a killer year because they came up with this new concept or this new idea that they would not have gained had they not opened the door and embraced people that they otherwise would not have inside of their shop. So diverse talent is where I think the gems are at this point. A super big believer in that. Some people, when they think diversity, they think, oh, this is like affirmative action. This is like you're giving preferential treatment to non-white cisgendered males. And it's like, I don't look at it that way. I look at it through the lens of, well, there's a lot of them there. So that must mean we're like kind of saturated, which means there's like talent out there that we are completely missing. That's who I'm trying to figure out. Like, where's that talent at? Let's create an opportunity for them. And many of them, simple demographic is they're women. So it's not hard to see when you walk into the shop and it's like 99 guys and one woman, and the one woman is on the designer product team and not on the engineering team. It's like, y'all are missing a bunch of talent out there. Like, there's got to be women out there that could do really well in this shop. Why don't you have any women on your floor? So that should also give folks hope. If you're struggling and you feel like it's because of my age, or it's because of my gender, or it's because of my sexual identity, that's okay. Like, the really smart leaders are going to cut through all of that, and they're just going to be focused on what's most important, which is going to be raw skill, talent, what your capacity is to make an impact on their team. So you want to focus on demonstrating those kinds of things. So I love the questions and interaction so far. Please, I know when I start talking, people forget to put the questions in there. So drop me some questions. I'd love to continue to have this conversation and answer questions and help folks that are looking for work. I've got a few more that have come in via email and in previous. So one, and this has come up a lot. I've answered this one before, but I'll take a stab at it again. Should I apply for remote or out-of-state jobs due to COVID? And what will it be like after COVID? That's I can't. The second half is I cannot predict, because who would have ever predicted a global pandemic, right? So with technology, it's also hard. The further out we go in technology, the harder it is for us to accurately guess where we're going to be, because we're creating like stuff we couldn't even imagine 5 to 10 years ago. That said, I think, yes, if you are looking for work, you should expand your geographic region, and you should be looking in regions outside of where you currently reside. And in most cases, I think tech employers are going to be very flexible with distributed workforces. And here's how it used to be. It used to be employers used to say, we're not hiring remote. Got to be on site. We want you to be in person so you can collaborate, so we can work with you, can ideate, we can have really quick, tight feedback loops. And so that kind of runs counter to a lot of the work that we do as software engineers when we're programming, because the opposite is if you ask any engineer, once they have the concept of what they need to do, then we usually want closed, quiet environments where we can stay super focused and knock out a lot of code and get a lot built, right? But when we're in the early stages of like developing an idea and architect and trying to design something, it does make sense to be collaborating with the whole team and whatnot. But then once you know what you like, and then it's like, hey, heads down and stay focused without distractions. So for that reason, most developers, they want a closed office, but most of the floor plans have been open. So there's already been like a little bit of, tension in software engineering, because we like the beautiful open office and collaboration and excitement of, you can see the CEO sitting on the floor with you and just that, small startup vibe, even in large organizations. But they never wanted to do remote because they didn't want to start to kind of have to manage different resources and different things going on, and the questions about productivity levels, all those kinds of things. So they would say no remote. But here's what would happen. One of the folks that would be on the team for a really long time would get super skilled in the platform and then say, hey, sorry, I have to resign because I'm moving for a family reason, whatever reason. I'm moving out of state and I won't be here on site anymore. And I know you don't allow remote. And then they'd be like, don't tell anybody, but we'll let you work remote. Because they'd rather keep that person than lose them if they're going to move to a different location. So for a long time, companies have allowed, 1 or 2 people to work remote because They just don't want to lose them. But they didn't want to take on the risk of brand new people in a distributed team or be a fully distributed team. So I say all that to say that these days it's become much more the norm to have a fully distributed team, to have folks working fully remote. So I don't think that you should worry too much about applying for remote positions and about what happens if in a year or 2 years, things kind of swing back to more in-person, physical, got to be there. I think if there are opportunities in a company saying, look, we're going to hire distributed teams, but we're only doing it throughout COVID, don't worry about that. Just get a foot in the door. And in a year or two, if things shift, with a year or two under your belt, then you'll be fine making a transition to another organization if they really can't accommodate you working remote in a permanent fashion. So that's one where you might want to just take a little bit of a risk and get in there. I think COVID is going to be around for a bit longer. So I think you got a good year at least of working remote before it could become a real big friction point. So that's my 2 cents on applying for remote and out of state, out of region type jobs. I think you should expand your search because there's lots of organizations that are looking and they're much more flexible at this stage right now. Again, if you have a question, feel free to drop a comment in either the YouTube comment or the LinkedIn comment. If you drop the comment in there, I'll see it and then I'll do my best to answer it. We do this every Tuesday. I try and give a little bit back by just jumping on and answering questions for early career developers, folks that might be in a coding boot camp, or they might be in a CS degree program. You're about to graduate, you're about to be out there in the world trying to eat, trying to make something back so you can pay off the student loans. I got you. I've helped hundreds of graduates land their first job at like huge companies. I got folks that I trained that went on and worked at IBM, Red Hat, Apple, Facebook, Google, and lots of small organizations like Trust and Will. And shout out to all the folks at Trust and Will, especially Devin and Frank, folks that went through a coding boot camp, and then a company had the foresight to say, we should grow our team and invest in our local community, and we should hire folks from these local boot camp programs because they can add value and they'll grow with us. And sure enough, if you've seen, Trust and Will is doing amazing. And I'm just so proud of the fact that we support super large enterprise Fortune 500 companies all the way down to small local startups in our community that are all seeking the same thing, which is great employees that are really gritty and are looking for an opportunity to demonstrate their skill. So if that's you, if you're like, look, I just want to work at a small startup, or I want to work in ad tech, or I want to work in biotech, life sciences, there's plenty of opportunity. The process, though, is that you have to treat it like a job, and it does require some things that are maybe not intuitive. And so feel free to ask questions, even if it might be slightly embarrassing. You think that this is something you should know. No shame. Get the information you need, get the data points that you need to be successful in your job search. Because realistically, the folks that I've seen do it really well, the process only takes them about a month, about 4 weeks. So if you graduated from a coding boot camp and it's been more than 4 weeks and you're struggling through this process, please ask questions. Describe what you're working on, ask questions. Send me a resume. I'd be happy to mark it up. My email's on the screen, and be happy to tell you this is what I think when I look at this as a hiring manager. Okay, so drop your questions in the comments and they'll come to me. Another one I got via email is, what is a good starting salary to ask for? That is the age-old question. And sometimes, believe it or not, I will get through the interview process and I will ask someone, so what are your salary expectations? And they don't have an answer. That's not good. You should be able to say, this is your salary expectation, and you seem super unprepared if you don't have a solid number or an answer. And this isn't, negotiation tactic wise, this isn't one of those scenarios where the first person to say a number loses. That's nonsense. I think you do need to be reasonable and realistic. And I think it's perfectly fine for you to give a starting salary in a range, but just know that if you give them a range, they're always going to pick the lower of the two if they're trying to negotiate the price down. So if you say, hey, I'd like to make 60 to 65, you probably get an offer at 60. unless they have like a requirement that all of our offers come in at exactly this range. There's no negotiation, that kind of thing. So I think it's reasonable in most places in our economy to be at that 60 for an entry-level role, software engineer. However, there are some markets that are super expensive, and there are companies willing to pay a premium in those markets. And so in the markets where you might be in like a New York or a Silicon Valley, in those markets, you might be able to start at 80. Does not shock or surprise me that folks are getting offers in the 70 to 80 range, because they're in markets where there's just a higher cost of living and a stronger demand for developers. So even the early career developers are commanding much, much higher salaries. But make sure it's reasonable for your region and for the cost of living associated with where you live. So that said, if you, for example, want to work remote and you live in like Idaho and you want to work for remote for a company that's in like New York or Silicon Valley, then you might have to adjust your ask down a little bit, because they are going to factor in the fact that your cost of living is lower. And so they're not going to want to compete at that same premium than they might offer if someone's in the Bay Area, right? In the thick of things where the cost of living is really expensive, and it justifies the higher salary. Now, it's not the greatest thing that they're doing that, but it's a reality. When you're negotiating salaries, you are negotiating. And one of the pieces of leverage that you might have if you're in San Francisco is, hey, I'm close, I can come into the office, and I have a higher cost of living associated with that. And so respectfully, this is the range that I need in order for me to be able to accept an offer here. That's very different than if you're in Idaho, where it's like you're living on a huge ranch and paying like very little. But again, it's negotiation. So it is going to vary quite a bit. All right. If you have a question, please feel free, drop it in the comments. It will take just a few minutes. I don't get them instantly. It kind of comes through the interwebs and then it makes its way to me, but I will definitely answer it. Kiana Brown, nice. Been a while. So historically, it has been taught to not discuss salary during the interview unless the individual has been selected. Sure. So I would say wait. You should have a good sense of where you're at. If this is like first interview, I as the employer or as the hiring manager often ask folks what their salary expectations are. And so if you're asked, then it's fine for you to give that range. But if you're not asked, then I would pause. And to your point, you might want to wait. And yeah, this is, I think, more in the software engineering space as well. When you say that the culture is changing, it has been my experience in software engineering. We're kind of like pretty direct and pretty blunt. Like, okay, what's your salary expectation? And then the candidate will throw out a number. What I'm trying to first assess is it reasonable? So I straight up, I'll tell you that I've had candidates say, well, I think I should I get $100,000. I'm like, you're entry level. Like, why? I'm curious how you come up with $100,000. That's what I just asked them. Like, I'm curious how you come up with $100,000 as an ask. And they might say there's a variety of responses that you will usually get. One might be, well, because I'm transitioning from a job where I used to make, well over $100,000, and that's what I need to survive. And that's tough because it's like, well, once you get used to that lifestyle, it is tough to take a couple steps back, but you have to start where your skill is. And I'll tell the person, like, that's tough, but I can't give you a 6-figure salary. You don't provide enough value for me to be able to justify $100,000 a year, right? It's great that you have a law degree, but that doesn't help with the software engineering that I'm going to need you to do. So, right? So there's that. The other piece that sometimes folks will say is, well, I went online, and when I looked online, I saw that the salary range for this position is this. And the challenge with that is that tool may not have it may not be adjusted for the cost of living for where your region is. So just be very, very cautious when you use that. Also, it's somewhat overinflated sometimes. The value of like having a certificate might be, or having like master's degree might be. If you're entry level, you need to I would recalibrate and make sure that the number that you throw out is reasonable and realistic. Because if it's too high, you'll kill the conversation, you'll kill the negotiation. Because I kind of look at it when someone throws a number out there that's like too high, it's like you're not a reasonable person. And now I look at you and view you differently, and I view you as a person that's not reasonable. And that's not necessarily a great candidate. So you want to be reasonable. It needs to be, you have to be able to justify why, like, this is the amount that is a reasonable amount for the skills that you bring to the table. And if it's unreasonable and it's like way over, you know, like the average starting salary in your area might be 60 grand and you ask for 100 and you're like, but I have this certificate that says I have this certification. It's like, okay, how much experience do you have? Well, I took these classes and I've done this project. So like very little entry level, like you're like way out of the ballpark. Because in my brain, I'm like, well, if you want to start at 100, then I think you think next year you're gonna be making like 150, and that's like, so that's not reasonable. Like you're completely out of the range of like, we can have a conversation about like, okay, what if we started you here, right? It's too hard to have when there's that much of a delta between what you're asking for and what's reasonable. So keep that in mind in terms of starting salaries. But yeah, I love what you said, Yana. I think historically, it's sort of a tough one to have until you get an offer, until there's an offer in hand, and then it's like trying to negotiate it. But I think that process is like kind of important. I use it as a way to judge the person's like understanding of the market, and I use it to judge whether or not they have good, like they're good at self-evaluating like what their ask is and if it's reasonable. So that I use it more for that than I do as like a negotiation tactic. So as an example, like with our apprenticeship program, like it's very clear. We start people off at a specific rate. If they have some prior experience that's relevant, then we can like level them to what that experience is. But that's it. There's not like we can do a bunch of back and forth negotiation. And unfortunately, it's just because we can't hire nearly the number of people that apply for our position. We only hire like 4 to 5% of the people that are interested in a role with us. And a lot of companies are probably the same way. Maybe not though. I hear there's a labor shortage. So any other questions? There's a couple more that have come through, and I will cover those if there's nobody else that has questions, but I'd love to cover some live. I'm trying to keep track of which ones that we already answered. So I answered that one. Which search should I use? Oh, which web? So one that came through, which job search website should I use? I love this one because it's almost like folks feel like there's this magic place that, you know, that's where the jobs are posted. That's where, and it's like, not really. Remember, the vast majority of jobs are not posted online for software engineering roles. So if you're looking for them, and that's where how you're basing your search is on postings, whether it be Indeed or Monster or Dice or Career Builder or, you know, ZipRecruiter, right? Any of those spots, only a fraction of what's available are in any of those places, and it's probably not on many, like most. Very few organizations can post across multiple platforms, but let's just say they do. That's just a fraction of what might be available inside of that huge organization. So it's super critical that instead of you focusing on, so I'm going to kind of indirectly not answer this question, but say, rather than focus on the job search website, I think you should like cut that part out of your brain completely and use that only as an indicator that these are companies that are looking for work. They're looking for talent, right? And it gives you a good sense of like, these are the organizations that you should be applying to because they've got, you know, they got some growth ahead of them. But you should, really important for you to put together a wish list of other organizations you'd like to work at, other engineering organizations that you'd like to sort of like you aspire to one day be either associated with or inside of, and constantly be networking with folks inside those organizations to create some internal champions that you could have on your side to say, hey, this position just opened up. It hasn't been posted yet. I think you should reach out to this person and I'll let them know that you're interested and get the conversation started, right? Because what happens is the engineering team, when they know that they've gotten budget approved to add new resources, the first thing they usually do is tell the engineering manager to talk to their employees and see if they can get a referral, get someone in without having to go through the work of posting the job and paying to post the job. And then most of the engineers will say, oh yeah, I know a bunch of friends. I know folks at other organizations. This is good. They've wanted to come work here. Like, I'll reach out to them. And then that's how you get that like opportunity, right? So if you're building out that network of just like connecting with people, when you're connecting with them, you're not connecting with them and immediately hitting them up and saying, hey, I'm looking for work. Do you have any jobs? Is that like, no. Add value, right? I love the fact that you work with React. Have you heard about, and what do you think of like hooks and Redux? Like, what are your thoughts? Are you guys using Redux? Are you guys using hooks? Start, nerd out with them. Start having technical conversations with them. Those are easy ones for you to have. You don't have to feel nervous. You don't have to feel like you're making any kind of asks. You're just nerding out about stuff that you're both interested in. And then eventually that could culminate into you've built a relationship. You're at meetups, you're seeing this person, and then when that opportunity happens, in their mind they think, oh, that's right, he was asking questions about React or whatever. He must know React. Let me see if he might be interested in this position, in this role. That's what you're doing. So you're not doing it to like, I'm going to do a favor for you, so you do something for me. That's not networking. Networking is trying to add value. How do you add value? Well, one way could be just having an interesting conversation with somebody. And it's just for the sake of having an interesting conversation. That's it. No strings attached, right? Awesome. Love the support, Navros. Again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Love to see if I can be helpful for you and provide some tips that'll shorten the job search process for you. Vax, yes. This is like it's the super secret. I feel like I've given up like my biggest gem, and that is network. And it's hard. I am a social anxiety type person. And so I don't like walking into a room and like feeling like I've got to like, you got to kind of do the dance around the outside of the circle until the circle opens up so you can kind of get into the circle, and then you can like ear hustle for a little while. And then you're going to say, oh, that's interesting. Right. But that's how I think about it. I just think of like, come up with your playbook. How are you going to do it? Your hook might be, I'm going to go to the bar first. I'm going to get a drink. And then once I'm at the bar, then I can kind of turn and survey the room in a casual way, and I'm going to look for two people, so it's easier for me to walk up, and then you do your ear hustle. You're just kind of listening in. Oh, that's interesting. And then you can ask a question, introduce yourself, all that good stuff. So just if you're nervous about that, formulate a plan, right? Don't feel like you're like everybody's socially awkward at an event. Get over that and just start networking. Show up. I had to put together the networking for introverts playbook because like that's it. Everybody feels, not everybody, but a lot of people feel the same way. They're just as nervous and socially awkward and uncomfortable as you. You just got to kind of learn to like relax, run your place, drink, ear hustle. Oh, that's interesting. Ask a question. Now you're in a dialogue. Now you're just nerding out, right? So if you can do that, you can be fine. You'll survive networking. And then once you've survived networking and you start building those connections, now you'll be in a position where people will just, when there's an opportunity, they'll know, oh man, that dude I was talking to seemed like a nice person, seemed like he needs a shot. He's putting in the work, he's putting in the effort, he's showing up. I should see if like this is how I get a hold of him, see if this is an opportunity he wants to jump on. And people will go out of their way to be a champion for you. So you need those internal champions. And you have the capacity to do that. If you're hearing this right now, you have the capacity to do it. You just gotta like, it's a job. You gotta think of it as like it's your job. And if I got a job cold calling and selling, I would be miserable. I had that once. I actually remember I worked at I don't know if it was a cold calling, it was like some kind of telemarketing. And I don't remember what we're selling. We're selling newspapers, something ridiculous, right? And so I remember I was there for about an hour. And they gave us that first break. And I just stood up and was like, hey, excuse me. Yeah, this is not for me. And so I did telemarketing for about an hour. I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me. I'm going to leave. Good luck. So I get it. Networking is not the jam for most people, but you have to treat it like it's a stepping stone. It's part of the process. If you want to be on the job search for a short period of time, if you want to be job searching for a really long time, Cool. Keep fighting it. But networking is definitely going to shorten the amount of time it takes by a lot, by a huge factor. So, all right. What information can I glean as a hiring official in a 30-minute interview? Oh, tons of information. Because a lot of times it may seem like I'm asking a very simple question, but man, like I can find a lot of insight because I've asked this question a lot of times. So it's kind of like with anything else. Like once you've done it enough, then you can tell based on the person's answer to this question, you can tell what they might answer to like 4 or 5 other questions because it's very consistent. If they answer this question, they answer these other 4 questions the same way. So once you get good at interviewing people, you don't need to ask those other 4 questions. You just need to ask the first question the right way, and you can get all of the other data points that you need from that first question. So when I was brand new and wasn't like comfortable and used to interviewing people, it might take me like 2 hours of talking with someone, having a conversation before I could get enough information where it's like, okay, I'm fairly confident I understand where this person is, and now I can make a judgment decision about can I get them to where we need them to be, will they be good fits on our team. Now I can do that in 30 minutes. 30 minutes is plenty of time. If I have enough information beforehand, I might be able to do an interview in 15 minutes. And then I can tell if I want to hire that person. So believe it or not, like it's really quick. So to prove that, I will give away one of my gems. Because it's not a huge factor. People probably aren't listening to this, so not going to use it. And if they do use it, then I know where they got it from. So I might ask someone, given too much work for a period of time, how would you handle that situation? So you were given too much work by your boss for a given period of time. How would you handle that situation? So the first thing that I usually get from many candidates is I'll go communicate to my boss, and then they go through the communication thing. I'm like, all right, cool. That's, fine. But if you think about it at a higher level, like I told you, I gave you a secret there. I told you, your boss gave you this. You have to assume your boss knows what they're doing. So your boss knows this is too much work for you to do in that period of time. Your boss might be doing this on purpose. They might be doing the same reason why I'm asking this question is to see if you can prioritize. And so when you go back to your boss, you've shown you can't prioritize on your own. You have to be told what is the priority. That's a challenge that maybe you just have to kind of work through in that environment. Your boss knows, okay, all right, this person doesn't quite understand how to prioritize tasks, or they're gun shy for some reason. So maybe somebody previously got upset that they made a wrong decision, and they're afraid if they make the wrong decision that I'm going to get upset at them. So there's a lot you can infer from that, and then you can ask follow-up questions based on that. But what I first want to figure out in this case is if a person says, I'll go to my boss first, then I will say something like, okay, let's assume your boss is not available. Then what would you do? Again, I want to see, are they still super gun shy? And some folks will say, well, I won't do anything until I hear back. Terrible response. And so that will eliminate me needing to ask 5 or 6 more questions, because they're just like, that's kind of not good. I don't want to say stupid. I'm just going to say that's kind of not good. And someone might respond, well, I will, because you told me that the boss isn't available. And I'm just like, oh, you're already off to a bad start. Then they'll go through the other pieces and they'll say, well, then I'll try and work on the easiest stuff, because that way I can get a lot of it done. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like that answer. In my brain, I don't say that, but I don't like that answer because they're focused on like how easy or hard to work is. And that's not important. That's not helpful. They might say something like, well, I'll work on the hardest things first, because then I know once I get that out of the way, then it'll be like my day will be easy after that. Not helpful. Well, I'll work on things that are quick and won't take me that much time. That way I can get more of them done. Not a good answer, right? And so you can like really, really like just based on 1 or 2 answers to a very short question, determine if this person has the skill set that you are hiring for, which is, can they prioritize? That's what I want to know. And if they say, well, if I was given too much work for the period of time by my supervisor, I would prioritize and I would work on the things that are the most important and urgent first. I would have a good sense of what would be valuable to our customers, and I would focus on that. textbook, awesome answer. Now I know in the absence of direct supervision, you're going to figure out what the customers need. You're going to problem solve. You're going to prioritize. You're going to best use your time. I'm going to ask 5 more questions to get to that. So from my standpoint, I don't think the length of the interview is nearly as important as being really crisp with the questions that you ask, the follow-ups to get to what I want to know, which is, can this person prioritize and work autonomously? I don't have to ask 5 questions about prioritization and autonomous or whatever. I can ask one scenario-based question and then follow up on their responses to determine, can they work autonomously? Do they feel in some way that they are gun shy and are not willing to take risks? Like all of those things that they will just like verbal vomit when they're going down the wrong path on the answer to that question. Or if they get it fast. And like, got it. You know how to prioritize. I can leave you to close up the office and be like, I know you never closed up the office before, but can you close up the office? I got to go. There's an emergency. And know that the office isn't going to burn down. And that's what you're looking for when you're trying to, that's what I'm looking for. I should correct it. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for individuals that can demonstrate they have the attributes that I think make them a good employee within our organization. So hopefully that's helpful. And I hope that the breakdown of that behavioral-based question makes sense. I mostly ask behavioral-based questions because I haven't found yet other signals we can use of like other good signals of what someone's capacity and aptitude is beyond the behavioral based. I don't think it makes sense to ask people like aptitude based questions or vocabulary based questions during an interview or coding questions, whiteboarding questions, things like that, because we're trying to screen for people that don't yet have those technical skills. So if you are looking for a role inside of an organization, you might have to do all of the behavioral things that I just talked about. But as a software engineer, you will also have to do some of those technical questions where they're going to give you a code challenge and they're going to expect you to write some code. And in many cases, it'll be on a whiteboard. They'll ask you to sort of describe your solution, maybe draw out your thought process, and then write out your pseudocode or your real code to implement the solution. So that technical piece is like secondary, and it's more or less important depending on like how big of a tech company is. How big do they need to scale? If they need scalable solutions, then they're going to follow up and ask you about your design, and they're going to ask you, what's the time and space complexity of the solution that you've created, and you need to be able to explain that in a technical way. Your big O, right? What's the big O? You need to be able to walk through that. So, Christiana, yes, I love it. It's one of my favorite questions. And if somebody aces it because they cheat and they just use my answer, it's all right. I got a couple other gems. I'm not going to share all of them. I can't let all the secrets out, but that's one that I think really encapsulates a very short behavioral based scenario that you can get a lot of information and go in a lot of different directions. And you do have to ask the right follow-ups. And there's a good way to ask the follow-up. If I ask the follow-up and I'd be in, like, sometimes we have to shorten it because like we only have a couple minutes in an interview. So I might say, how do you prioritize? But in many cases, I will say, okay, assume the boss is not there. So I just adjust the scenario slightly to see if that gets them steered in the right direction. Sometimes they still completely miss it. They're like, well, if the boss isn't there, then I think I would wait. And, it's like, oh, it's terrible. But I used to get that a lot, especially for people that have personalities that they're not used to being autonomous and they're used to being managed and micromanaged. Oh, they're just like, no, I'd wait. Like, I don't know, find something else to work on, but I'm going to wait. And you're like, that's a terrible, just do it. And then if you do it wrong, just be like, sorry, I tried. I love that. I love that people say, I'm going to try. And then if it's not right, then, at least I tried and took my best guess at what this was going to help. And, in the absence of, direction, I'm going to really think about what's most important, what's urgent and time-based, and work on those things first. Because there could be some opportunities, especially, that are time sensitive. Like that opportunity is not going to be there tomorrow if we don't get it done today. So let's do those big, important things today. That's like classic behavioral based. Awesome. Rootman 9803. This is a Twitch user. I love, man. I hope we blow up on Twitch. I want all the people to stop playing games and learn how to code. So, Want to become famous? No. Don't want to buy followers or viewers? Sorry. Moving on. I love it. When you're big enough to get spammed on, that means that you're doing something good, right? Doing something good because people are like spamming. Oh yeah, these are like, I think being able to interview and communicate your skills and like communicate what your problem solving process is and how you're thinking about it. These are things I wish more folks were taking the time to like integrate into that like early childhood development, so that people can like think and act the way they're supposed to and not worry about the consequences, but instead just kind of have a good North Star and like, okay, I should be trying to be helpful for folks. I should be trying to, be my best self. I should be trying to figure out my superpower and like use it to help people. I should be a bucket filler, not a bucket taker. All those things, super important. I love it. All right, we got a few minutes left. I got a few more questions on my to-do list of things I have not been able to cover, but we can save them for next time. I apologize, but we'll go for an hour. Should I follow up after an interview? Yes. So the more important question is like time frame wise. I know it's usually baked into it. People usually want to know like what's the appropriate amount of time to wait. Man, I'm usually like same day you could send a thank you message and you could be like, hey, appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and talk a little bit about what you're working on. Make it about them, what you're working on as an organization. It seems super exciting. I love X, Y, and Z technology. I love the fact that you are doing insert mission of the organization, right? And I feel like I could bring a lot of value and, quick brief, your top 2 or 3 attributes that you think resonate really well, or that you think you've nailed them during the interview. And then the follow-up that I would give after that would be at least wait 2-3 business days minimum. But, you've given them a thank you note. Even better is if you handwrite and mail the thank you note, or handwrite and drop it off at the reception desk. That's money. Because how many people like handwrite thank you letters, right? It's like you're going to rise so much further above if you can do something small like that just takes a little bit extra effort, a little bit extra elbow grease. So drop off handwritten thank you note at the front desk for the lead person who's the hiring manager that interviewed you, and then give it at least a week. Because remember, the hiring manager is probably super busy. They're probably screening other candidates, trying to go between other stakeholders and decision makers and make sure. It's not like in many cases they can just say, yeah, I like the interview, I'm going to offer you a job right here on the spot. It's not like that telemarketing job where you just showed up and then like, all right, come back tomorrow at 8:00. We're going to put you on the floor. That's not how it usually works. So because it's a little bit more intentional, you should just be cognizant of the fact that it's going to just take a minute for you to get back to the point where they can give you meaningful feedback, which is like, hey, you're moving through the pipeline. It'll take me another week or so, but stay tuned, right? That's what I would anticipate about a week out. And about 2 weeks out, I think they could be close to making decisions. They've screened other candidates. If you're on the tail end of the screening, then you might get feedback sooner. But if you're in the middle, they might have other interviews that they've scheduled. And so they have to get through all of those interviews. And they have to sort of rank and determine who they want to call back for follow-ups or who they like out of that. So just give it a little bit of time and patience. But after you've interviewed, I'd say about a week. If it's a phone screening, then I'd say 3 days is probably good. Like you can follow up with them. At that point, they might tell you, hey, thanks for following back up with me. I'm actually in the process of scheduling some on-site interviews. I'll be back in touch with you soon. Hopefully, you'll be one of the people we bring back. You're staying top of mind and you're not being annoying, right? You've gotten a response, kick it out about a week, about 5 business days. And if you haven't heard back in a week, then follow up again. Hey, it was really great hearing from you. Since we last talked, I've worked on this project, and I'd really love an opportunity to come in and have a conversation with some of your, engineering leaders or your hiring manager, right? So make sure it's, intentional touch points. Christiana asked a question. I think we're coming up on the last question. So if you got another question, please please drop it in the comments. I'll take my shot at answering it. And if I miss it because we run out of time, I will cover it next time. I'll just add it to the list here. So how do I deal with rejection from a company that you've had multiple positions open? For example, you're declined for one position, you see another one, good fit. Do you recommend the candidate speaking up about the other position, asking for it? Absolutely. So I think in many cases, if they thought you were a really solid candidate, but for whatever reason, this just wasn't the right fit, or they couldn't get the hiring manager in that department, they will often do this for you. They'll often say, hey, I know you interviewed with this, but would you be open to interview with this other person? And they'll tee it up for you. So don't take it as some aren't that proactive. So they won't do that for you. They'll just be like, hey, I'm just scouting for my team. Like, there's other jobs. You go deal with those people, right? And they're not like super good helpers. So don't take it like if they don't tee up other opportunities, like there's something they have something against you, or you didn't think you were fit. They might just think you're not a fit for their team. So absolutely apply for the other role and say, hey, look, I think I'd be a great candidate for this particular role. And I've had an opportunity to talk to, well, actually, I wouldn't even put that you talk to the other team. I would just apply for it. And when you get into the interview and you have a conversation, just be all about how your skill set matches this particular role, and treat it like you hadn't even been in there last week talking to the other person. If you have, they'll know. So they'll see you and they might bring it up. But I think you'd be better off just like go after the other one. If you think that your skill set matches, you'd be a good fit. Absolutely. 1,000% ask for the interview. What's the worst you're going to say? No, right? Like, no, that might feel like super hurtful because you're just like, man, I've seen this job open for so long. I know I can crush it. And if that's the case, then here's what you do. Here's your technique. If you feel like you really could be a great fit for that role, then don't give up. Work on other projects. Maybe work on some projects that demonstrate the skills that you feel are going to make you super valuable inside the organization. And follow them in another few weeks and say, hey, look, I noticed that job posting is still available, and I just wanted to share with you some of the work that I've been doing since the last time that we spoke. Give them an example of the work. And then kick it out. 3-4 weeks. Now we're 6 weeks out from when you last interviewed there. Hey, I noticed you're still looking. I realize you're an amazing company and you probably take your time to hire, and you hire slow and you fire fast. But since the last time I reached out to you, I've been working on these other projects, and here's a couple of the other things that I worked on. And you just keep like, here's what I'm working on. This is what I'm doing, right? And you're not making it like, hey, can you please? It's just like, this is what you've moved on, but you're still interested. And while you've moved on, these are other things you're doing to continue to develop your skill set and to grow. But I think I could add a lot of value to this team, right? And here's the skills, and I'm showing you I have these skills. And then you can work your way around. You can try and find other internal champions, other people inside the organization that would be willing to co-sign and be like internally trying to advocate, like, stay with it. Don't give up. If this is like your dream company, you really want to work at this organization, then, keep at it. But you want to have a reason and not just like, hey, just want to reach back out to you and tell you that I think you got it wrong during the interview. I'm really going to be a great fit for this job. Because that's in essence what you're saying if you don't give them any solid evidence. What you're saying is you were wrong, and that approach is probably not going to work for most people. And I get it when I have said like, hey, look, sorry, we're not going to interview you, or we're not going to offer you the job. I get those like 1 or 2 emails from someone that's just like, no, really, like I'm a better fit for this job than whoever else you're thinking about, and it's just like so tone deaf, one, but also just like you're not going to win in an argument. You're not going to change my initial assessment unless you bring something new to the table, and you give them a window, you give them an out, you give them a like, hey, this is something I didn't mention during the interview. This is something you might not have seen from me. Here's an example of my work. You're giving them that opportunity to like save face and be able to say, okay, maybe this is worth taking another look. But if you try to embarrass them and tell them you're wrong, like you got it wrong when you interviewed me, you should have hired me, be like, get out of here. Right? They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that noise. So you got to bring them something, right? And then be like, yo, you know what? I really appreciate the fact that you're following up and you're showing that this is something that is really important to you. And I like that. I like that tenacity. I love seeing the work that you're doing. Here's like some specific things that I could say I'd like to see you do or develop. And I think we should have a conversation, right? Or you get some mentorship out of it. But I think you'll get further if you take that approach. So hopefully that answers your question, Christiana. And this has been super good this week. Got a lot of good interaction with folks. So I will do this every week. I'll just keep at it. It cannot be stopped. I'm going to help as many people as I can get that foot in the door, get that first job, because these careers, man, so nice. Last job I had, last job I had where I was like in the office, senior software engineer, I had dogs in the office. I had catered breakfast and lunch every day. We had the snack wall behind here. We had the Limitless LaCroix in the fridge. And like, oh man, it was nice. And a good salary. And the reality is, I know there's a lot of people that could do that work. They just need time and they need a shot, get a foot in the door. They need experience to get good enough to be adding a lot of value to engineering teams. But man, it's a good career. It's a good path. Lots of opportunity. And it's work that lots of women, lots of folks that are underrepresented could be doing. And we just got to get after it. So I will see you next week. Every Tuesday, 12 o'clock Pacific, we do Looking for Work. Later.